Hello and welcome to today's video. Recently I had a question on one of my YouTube channel asking how to join in a new colour. So today I'm going to show you how to join in a new colour or join in a new yarn. So this will work whether you have run out of the ball of yarn you're knitting with and you need to join in a new ball, or whether you're actually changing colour. So I'm going to show you several different ways and tell you the pros and cons of some of them and tell you which ones I normally use and which ones I prefer. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns, I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website yarnaddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. And if you think I sound like I'm not very well, I actually have a really bad cold and it's gone to my voice, so my voice sounds a bit croaky, but I feel absolutely fine. So hopefully my voice won't be too irritating for this video. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know in the comments what you think. So let's look at the first way of changing colour or joining in a new yarn. So it doesn't matter if the yarn you're joining in is the same colour as before, you've just run out and need to join in a new ball, or whether you're actually changing colour or adding a colour. I've decided to do this in the middle of the row just to show you how to do that. But for most things, I will try and join at the beginning of the row, especially for things that are seamed, because it means I can weave in the end into the seam. And for things like scarves and shawls, I find it neater to weave in the end if I do it at the edge. But some things are worked in the round, and for certain accessories as well, it makes sense to join in the middle of the round. So I'm worked in the middle of the row. I have left a tail of my old yarn, about 10 centimeters, and I'm going to join in my new yarn. So the way I do it, and I've always done it this way, is I just leave a strand of my old yarn hanging down, and then I pull out the equivalent, roughly, of my new yarn. I like my ends to be fairly long, so I would say at least 10 centimeters. They may actually be slightly longer. And then I start knitting. Doesn't matter if you knit English or continental style. I just start knitting with the new yarn. You will get a bit of a hole where you join, but that will disappear when you weave in your ends later. So I'm just going to knit to where I joined the yarn. And as I get to that stitch, you can see that stitch becomes very loose. I just knitted and I pull the yarn tight, just pull the tail. If the tail is really short, as that stitch becomes looser as you knit it, if the tail is really short, it's more likely to slip through the stitch below and come undone. So that's another reason why I like to leave a slightly longer tail. And then I'm going to knit over the green bits again, that stitch, because there's nothing anchoring that yarn. It's a little bit loose. So normally I just pull both of them as I knit across it the first few times, and then after that is fine. And then at the end I will weave in that end. So I'm just going to knit a couple of rows quickly, and I will show you how I will weave in those ends later as well, but I'll just do a couple of rows quickly and show you the next method for joining in a new yarn. Okay, so let's try another method of joining in the yarn. I've knitted a couple of rows, so you can see that those stitches from my first join are still a bit loose, so I'm just going to pull them. I'm not going to weave in the ends till I've finished my little swatch here. The method that a lot of people like to use is they like to hold the new strand and the old strand together. So I have the tail of my old yarn there, and I put that over my hand as normal. If you knit with your yarn in your right hand, that's fine, you can do this that way as well. And then I take out my new yarn, pull out the tail, and I loop that over, so that tail is going to the right because I'm knitting with the yarn that goes to the ball. And I hold those two together, and a lot of people like to knit 1 or 2 stitches together like that, and then they will drop the tail and carry on with their proper yarn, and then at the end they will weave in that end. The problem with that is that it does give you a double thickness of yarn, so it depends on what you're making. With some things that might be okay, but with some things it might be a bit visible. Also, if you're changing colour, you will be able to see it. So if I take one of each colour, loop the yarn over each other, the green tail is to my right, the yellow tail is to my left, and then I knit 1 or 2 stitches together, drop the yellow one, and carry on knitting with the green one. Obviously, because I have knitted with 2 different colours, you can see it. So let me just knit a couple of rows and show you what that looks like. When using the knitting stitches together method, some people will just knit 1 or 2 stitches, and that is so they don't end up with a hole like we did for the first join. That hole will disappear when we weave the ends in, but if you are knitting with just the same colour, so you run out of the yarn and you need to join a new ball, then it might be okay, although it can add a bit of thickness, although I can't really feel it here, and these are quite thick DK yarns, almost Aran weight yarns. But can you see here how that is a green stitch and the yellow is kind of hiding here, and here that's a yellow stitch with the green kind of hiding at the back. So you do get that little bit of a join when you are using 2 different colors. If you're using the same color, then it's not such a problem. I just knitted 2 stitches with the 2 yarns held together. Some people will knit several stitches, so they will knit several stitches one way, drop the tail, carry on knitting, then on the way back they'll pick up the tail again and knit a few more stitches with the first tail, and then they'll pick up the second tail and knit a few stitches with that tail as well, and then they will treat that as the end woven in and trim it. I've done that before, and for certain things that can look absolutely fine. So some of these methods have names and some I don't know what they're called, so I'm going to show you a method called clasped weft join, I think it is. So I'm going to make my tail slightly longer of the green yarn. I've cut off a slightly longer tail. You probably don't need it to be quite that long. Let me make it a bit shorter. I think this method works well if you're knitting with variegated yarn or the same color yarn. I'm not sure how well it works if you're knitting with 2 different colors. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to loop the strand around each other like that. Hang on. So we're going to take the old tail and we're going to take the new yarn, pull out the tail, put it across, loop that yarn over and loop that yarn over, so that your yarn, can you see that, how it kind of loops around each other? So if you lay the old tail down, put the new tail over it, fold the old tail over, and then the yarn is kind of linked around the other like that. And then you have to be careful when you pick it up again so you don't pull it all loose. When you start knitting, you have to make sure that you have a bit of tail from the old yarn. So if I start knitting here, I want to make sure I have a bit of tail of the old yarn here. So I'm knitting with 2 strands of the old colour now. And then that's where it changes. So now I get 2 strands of the new colour. If I had a longer row to go, I would knit a few stitches with each colour, so that's where it changed over. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I go, then I would drop the tail, finish my row, and then next time I go across those stitches, I would pick up the tail again. So let's pretend I'm knitting back. I come to where that tail is. I will quite often pick it up, hold it with my working yarn, and it's a little bit short to do this, and I will just knit a few stitches, not very many, like that. Drop the tail again, carry on knitting. So I'm knitting now over the double stitches from the row below. Oh, that's where that other green tail is. So when I get to where the green tail is, that's where I originally joined in the green tail. Pick up the green tail and just knit a few stitches together, and then I drop the green tail on the wrong side and carry on in the yellow yarn. Okay, so let's look at another method for joining in your yarn. So I'm going to knit a few stitches. I've heard this method described by Stephen West, who's a famous knitwear designer, as the Weavin' Stevens, I think, Weavin' Stevens, something like that. I don't think that's the official name of it, and I don't think Stephen West, as far as I know, he did not invent it. I knew about it before I'd ever heard of Stephen West, but that's the thing with knitting. There are loads of techniques that are known by lots of different people over a long period of time. So I've cut my yellow yarn. I'm going to join in my green yarn. So the idea with this method is that you weave in the other yarn as you go. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to start knitting with this one. I'm going to knit one stitch. I don't like using this method because I find it slows me down. And then I'm going to twist the yellow around the green and drop it and pick up the green and knit the next one. Pick up the yellow, twist it around the green, drop the yellow and knit with the green. So if I show you on the back, you can see the green is to the left and the yellow is to the right. So I'm basically going to pick up the yellow and twist it around the green. Can you see that? I'm going to drop the yellow and pick up the green. You can twist it either way. I don't think it makes any difference. I don't use this very often because I find it a bit slow, because you have to kind of stop and do that every time. So I'm not going to do any more than that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. Then I'm just going to knit to the end. I get to where my yarn is, I'm going to knit that stitch. The yarn is there because I pull with the yarn at the back. If you pull with the yarn at the front, you know how to do this, but because the yarn is at the back where I pull, I have to bring it to the front, and then I take the yellow yarn over. So I'm just twisting it over, take my green yarn to the back again. If you purl with the yarn at the front, you don't have to do that. So if I was going to do English purl, I would just take the yellow over, purl. I'm not very good at purling English style. Yellow over, you have to make sure you do it on the wrong side. I'm going to carry on doing it continental style because at least I'm a little bit quicker doing that. But you do have to flick the yarn back and forth. So now we got to where the green tail is. So I'm going to drop the yellow tail. Let's cut it a bit shorter because it's very long. Okay, so we're going to pick up the green one, take the yarn to the front. Because they're both green now, it's a bit more difficult to see, but I'm going to twist them around each other and then purl a stitch. If I was knitting, it would be easier because they'd both be at the purl side of the fabric anyway, but because I'm purling and I purl with the yarn at the back, it's a bit tricky. I don't use this method very often at all because I do find it slows me down a lot. Having said that, you're only talking about for a few stitches, so it's not too much of a problem. Okay, let's just do that and then we'll carry on. So what I would do now on the next row, because I did the yellow one that direction and then back a few stitches, but the green one I've only taken it in that direction. So when I go back, if this was an actual piece of knitting, I would do it when I get to the green tail. I would knit a few stitches back the other way again, just so I go both directions. But I'm not going to do that because this is just practice. This is the method I like the least, I think. I don't like how it looks, and I tend to think it can look a bit messy. I think it looks fine when I'm doing garter stitch in like a variegated yarn because it kind of hides it, but I don't really like that method at all. Let's look at the last method we're going to look at. This one is basically stranded colour work. It's how you would knit stranded colour work. So let's have a look. Let's just break this. Actually, I'm going to leave this joined in. I'm not going to break it yet. I'm going to pick up my other yarn. So what you can do, whether you're knitting with two different colours or the same colour, is you can do one colour of each. So this could be two green colours, two green balls. You would have a bit of a tail left with your old yarn, and then joining your new yarn, you basically knit one orange, one green, one orange. So I knit one with each hand. Like that. So let's break that green yarn. So when you work back again, you just need to do that again. And again, this for me is the problem because we're now on the purl side. And I don't like knitting stranded colour work on the purl side. So obviously when these are two different colours, it causes a problem because you can see it. But if they are the same color, then it works better. So one yellow, one green, one yellow, one green. And you don't need to do, unless you've got very slippery yarn, you don't need to do loads of stitches. Usually 5 or 6 in one way and half back. So 5 or 6 one way, 2 or 3 in the other direction. So that is where that tail is, the yellow tail. So now I'm obviously going to be knitting with both yellow yarns, so it won't be as visible. You can knit with them both English style if you prefer, it's all up to you. And then because that colour I've done that way and back, so that one's done, I can trim that one. This one I've only gone in one direction, so I would work that one on the next row, I would work it back again. But I'm going to stop here, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so I'm leaving this on the needle because I want to use it for something else in a minute. So let me just trim some of these other yarns because they're a bit long. So once you've joined in the yarn, if you think your yarn is secure and you don't need to weave it in anymore, that's fine. You can just snip them. I don't tend to snip them flush with the fabric, just because then sometimes they can work their way through, depends on how loose your fabric is. But I'm just going to snip these to kind of get them out of the way. So this first method I showed you, that's the method I always use, but you do end up with a bit of a hole. So let me show you how I weave in the ends to make sure I don't get a hole. So it doesn't matter which yarn you take first. Thread the needle onto one yarn and then take the 2 yarns. So the yellow is to my right and the green is to the left. I'm going to take the yarns and twist them around each other. So my green is still on my left and my yellow is on the right. So they loop around each other. Then I'm going to take the green. So I'll just pull the green a little bit. Don't pull it too tight, but just pull it a little bit so that it kind of snugs up that hole, if you like. Then I'm going to choose a row of purl stitches. And I'm going to, so purl stitches have bumps that go like that and then bumps that go in the other direction between the top bumps. So just choose a row of bumps. It doesn't matter if it's the top bump or the bottom bump. Work a few stitches like that, go through the bumps in a few stitches, pull the yarn through. At this point, just pull the other tail as well, like that. And then, especially when you're new to using this method, I would turn it to the right side and see if you're happy with it. So that's where the join is and you can't really see it. Turn it back to the wrong side, and then I'm going to take this one and go back a few stitches. If I went 6 stitches the other way, I'll go 3 or 4 back again. And just make sure you don't pull it too tight. And then I tend to stretch the fabric a bit just to make sure I haven't pulled it too tight. And then we're going to do the other one. So because we did the green one in that direction, we're going to do the yellow one in the other direction. So I'm going to go around the green stitches. Doesn't really matter if I go around the green or the yellow ones. Let's do one more. I usually do sort of like 5 to 8 stitches, depending on how slippery the yarn is and how loose my tension is. And I will quite often put my needle through all those stitches and then pull the yarn through rather than doing it one at a time. Pull it, but don't pull it too tight. If you want to check the other side, pull on the fabric a bit just to make sure it doesn't pucker. And then we're going to go back a few stitches. So I'm just going to go back 3 stitches. Pull the yarn through, don't pull it too tight. And then we're going to snip that end as well. So that was a few methods for how to join in the new yarn or a new color. I use the first method and I occasionally use the second method. Second method works better if the 2 yarns are the same color. First method works for everything, so you can use whichever one you want to use. I hope you enjoyed that video and you found it useful. Let me know in the comments if you use any of those methods and which one you prefer, and if there are methods that I showed you that you haven't tried, If you would like to try them, let me know which one you want to try and which ones you think is the best one. And if you try other methods, if you use another method, let me know that in the comments as well. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.